mostly I focus on phones that are quite new, seeing how they do and of course how they perform in terms of camera, CPU and of course display. But what if I want to talk about an old phone? A phone that I actually never owned, but still was very interested in. Let's talk about the HTC 10. Man, I miss having such a simple design. Either way, let's jump into the video talking about the HTC 10 and also reasons why I think sadly that HTC failed. So I quickly want to start this video talking about why I think HTC failed as a brand, and it started with of course phones like this that were actually really loved. The HTC One, the HTC One M7, the 8 and of course the 8S, the 9. Then slowly and surely it turned to lesser and lesser in terms of phone performance, but also things that just weren't that good. Now to begin with, when it came to the older HTCs, what they always did is this ultra pixel, having a low resolution camera, but allowing a bit of a bigger sensor feeling, so allowing more light in, and this was their whole plan. But that only works till a degree. If you get a 4 megapixel camera, you get a 4 megapixel resolution, which is quite low. And you will notice it. Yes, in low light it could perform better, but in turn, in daytime, it just didn't do that much. So I feel like here, they went a bit weird. But when it comes to HTC, that's something that you will often see. For instance, the HTC U12 Plus. A phone that I in general liked, but why did they remove the buttons and made it into something that is just haptic? Which makes no sense. The button was there, it just didn't really work. You just had to press on it, even though you didn't get the feedback of pressing it apart from the vibration motor that is inside. It will never be able to replace the proper click of a button. This is where HTC I feel like often fails at. They always had something, just something up with their phone that made it not a good option, not a viable option compared to the competitors that didn't have that weird thing that made no sense. And HTC sadly kept doing that. But the HTC 10 is one of those devices where I hardly have anything to say about it when it comes to those weird things. So let's discuss the HTC 10 and focus a little bit about the specifications as well. You get a 5.2 inch display with a 1440p resolution, protected by Corning Gorilla Glass 3. In terms of CPU, you got the Snapdragon 820 inside. In terms of memory, you get 32GB or 64GB, with both of those having 4GB of RAM, but you can expand it via the MicroSD. When it comes to the camera, you had a 12 megapixel camera and that is it. Well, you of course had a front facing camera, but on the rear you had just one camera, which is perfectly fine, especially around that time. The 12 megapixel sensor had a 1.8 aperture and a 1/2.3 inch sensor size. It also had, of course, optical image stabilization and laser autofocus, and 4K and 30 frames per second video recording supported as well. The front-facing camera, 5 megapixels, and of course, 1080p and 30 frames per second. And then something that HTC is really well known for, apart from, of course, the lovely unibody that is still really feeling nice in the hand, especially with smaller sizes like these phones, which I still think should be offered. Having that possibility to use a smaller phone is something that I feel should not be removed. But also what should not be removed is features that you have on this phone. Like already stated, you do have that microSD slot in this and a 3.5mm headphone jack on top as well, which is something that is a miss on a lot of phones, and I feel like that's a real waste, because the 3.5mm headphone jack, no matter how people try to twist it, is better than Bluetooth. It's not even close. 3.5mm headphone jack for the win, that's for sure. But when it comes to audio, this is again one thing where HTC was well known for. How does it compare to a more modern phone? I will say, I already tested it, and I will say that yes, it still sounds amazing, but it doesn't necessarily compete with all the modern phones. For instance, right here I have the Vivo X90 Pro. Let's compare a little bit of audio and showcase the difference between the two with the same song. So that was the good sounding Vivo X90 Pro. Now let's go to the HTC 10. So in general, audio performance is still really good. You can hear that the audio performance in itself is really good. It's just the volume that cannot compete with modern phones. Yes, technology has evolved, and we're not talking about a phone that has been released in like 2010, but overall I will say that the audio still does well. Music that comes out of it sounds good. It sounds vibrant and it has quite a decent amount of depth to it for a phone. With that being said, it is an older phone, and with that also being said, audio definitely doesn't reach the level of something like the Vivo X90 Pro, simply because it doesn't have the audio level. It's quite soft and quite quiet. But again, for a phone that is this old, with all the technology inside, I think they actually did a really good job. Then let's talk about the camera. How does this one single camera on the back perform? I will say, not too shabby. Not too shabby at all. Here are some samples taken on the HTC 10. So, the HTC 10, what do I think at the end of the phone itself? Honestly, I think it still holds up really well. In terms of design, this is really nice, especially in this red color. I really love it. It's such a nice device to hold, and overall, of course, unibody does work well, and it done an excellent job with it. Yes, you have antenna lines, but they done it in a subtle way, unlike Apple, what they have with that whole weird system. Overall, I will say, it still looks and feels really nice, and again, especially in this red color, which is my favorite when it comes to this HTC 10. Of course, you have your fingerprint scanner that works, but isn't as fast, clearly. Of course, you have your display that gets decently bright, and often outside I can still see what is going on. But I will say, when it comes to really warm days and bright sunshine, it gets quite difficult to see what is on the display, even if you hold it normally. But for myself, I think if you want a good backup phone, a phone that you can easily use next to it, a phone that you want to use for music because of the 3.5mm headphone jack and MicroSD, then I can easily recommend a phone like this. It's still such fun to use as well overall, and that simplicity in terms of design is also something that for me really stands out, and I really love that about the HTC 10. But if you want to use it as your main device, I would not recommend it, simply because you're not getting any updates anymore. There are probably ways to get proper Android on it, newer Android, but honestly, if you get it just like this and you're not going to play around with the software and get newer Android versions, I would never advise this as your main device with your banking details on it and so on, because simply put, security isn't there anymore. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this a little bit different video, and let me know what you think about the HTC 10. Would you still rock a phone like this? And if this had a modern skin, so a full display and still that one single camera, 3.5mm headphone jack, this size, and of course the microSD, would you want it? Or would you even want a phone like this that is modernized? Single camera still, but a better lens, for instance a 1-inch sensor. I would actually really like that. Same size. Bezels still there, doesn't really bother me, and of course the 3.5mm headphone jack. Just the internals changed. Would you want that? I think I kind of want to. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this video, and of course if you did, don't forget to subscribe. I'm trying to get 10,000 subscribers before the end of the year, and of course, yeah, pressing that subscribe will definitely help. And of course, don't forget the bell icon and liking video and commenting and so on. Anyway, have a good one, and talk to you guys in the next.